Hi, folks. I hope that you guys are doing pretty well. So today is Wednesday, the 16th of August, 2023, and in today's video, I want to talk about Revelation chapter 9, specifically the prophecy which talks about the 200 million horsemen. You will find these on Revelation chapter 9, verses 14 to 20. Okay. Now, I want to talk about this 200 million army because I personally think that many Bible scholars are having a difficult time interpreting who these 200 million horsemen really are. Okay. Now, what I'm hearing out there on YouTube is that everybody that I heard on YouTube so far has said that this 200 million is actually referring to perhaps an army coming out of China, might of 200 million, or perhaps in partnership with North Korea and maybe India. And they say this because, for obvious reasons, China alongside with India. They are the two most populous nations in the world. Between them, they have 2 billion, just over 2 billion. So it is no wonder that, when people read, this Revelation 9, especially about the 200 million, people will then form an immediate, picture, or they will paint a picture in their minds. Okay, well, 200 million horsemen, that can only come from China. And I think, to be quite honest with you, people are viewing this as symbolic rather than real. Okay, now what do I mean by real? Now, one of the problems with the book of Revelation is that on many of its chapters, it's highly symbolic, but also in some chapters, it's actually quite real. And knowing the difference between the two, then you really have to be extremely careful when you read the prophecies themselves. Now, one of the tips that I learned, as a student of eschatology is that um, you shouldn't jump into conclusions immediately when you read a Bible prophecy, okay? Let me give you the example here. When people read 200 million horsemen, they immediately think China, period, full stop, and that's it. And it's actually not the case at all, in my personal opinion. When I read all of chapter 9, bearing in mind that, like I just said, that, the book of Revelation can be highly symbolic, but it's also real. But what I have figured out by reading chapter 9, especially, with the locust, okay, and also with the 200 million horsemen, is that this is actually real. This is actually real, and it's not symbolic. I repeat, it's not symbolic. Um, because, when I read, about the locusts and how they look in terms of the physical shape and what they are going to do, okay, read them for yourselves and just take your time. And you will see that the language, although it can appear symbolic, is actually real. It's actually quite real. What he's saying, in other words, that the shapes of these locusts, in the description, are actually quite real as to how they're going to look like and what they are going to be doing. In other words, that they're going to be chasing those that don't have the seal of God in their forehead. Now, in this video, I'm not interested in talking about the locusts, but I really have to draw a parallel with the locusts and the 200 million horses. You know why? Because the parallel, when you read them, especially the description of these horsemen, when you compare it to the locusts, uh, the language for both, if you like, draws a parallel in very similar things, and I, to be quite honest, when I read the language very carefully, I really believe that this 200 million is actually going to be an army made up of, fallen demonic angels, if you like, and that they are going to be led by these four angels, okay? Now, if you read chapter 9, verse 15, and it says, and the four angels were loose, which were prepared for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200 million. And I heard the number of them. And as I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them having breastplates of fire. So have a look at the language here, having breastplates of fire. So these horsemen, okay, that are gonna be sitting on these horses, they have breastplates of fire and of jacinth and brimstone, and the head of the horses were as the heads of lions, okay? And out of their mouth issue fire and smoke and brimstone. Notice how, the language is pretty much referring to, demonic entities. It's not really referring to, I believe, I don't think that we can symbolize this as, as in saying, hey, it's just going to be a bunch of tanks, from China, firing shells and things like that. I don't believe this for one moment, folks, because when I read the language here, the language itself suggests to me quite clearly that this is not symbolic at all, that this is actually quite real, because look what it says here. Now, by these three, in other words, fire, smoke, and brimstone, was the third part of men killed. Okay, again, by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone which issue out of their mouths. Okay, so out of the mouths of these horses, okay, this is how they are going to kill one third of humanity. For their power is in their mouth and in the tails, okay? For the tails were like unto serpents and had heads, and with them they do hurt. So, what can I say about these folks? Like when you read chapter 6, okay, and you see the four horses of the apocalypse come out, okay, then we know that the white horse represents the Antichrist, okay, and, in other words, it is symbolic, okay, it is symbolic, but we gotta be very careful, folks, how we decipher this, because, like I said at the beginning of the video, some parts in the book of Revelation are symbolic, others are pretty much real, and others are actually a mixed bag of symbolic and real. And how do you know the difference? Is, well, you really got to study, these prophecies word for word, very, very carefully, and the context. When you read the context, okay, it will tell you that these 200 million are actually, a huge army of, demonic entities, because it really does draw in its wording parallels to the locust. Okay, for example, like you got breastplates here, right? And you also got breastplates here as well. Okay, so and also you got um, parallels in how they're gonna wipe out humanity. Okay, fire, smoke, and brimstone. And here how they're going to, how the locusts are gonna be chasing men. Obviously they're not gonna die or anything, but they're gonna sting them. But just, the parallel of both the locusts and the horsemen. Okay, you draw a conclusion that, hey, this is actually demonic entities. This is real language. Real language. It's not symbolic at all. I actually believe that. Uh, that this is real, because even here where it says, and the four angels were loosed. Okay, so we're talking about angels here. And if you draw a parallel with the locust, okay, then it's also when the where it says here, and the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven and unto earth. Okay, so when it talks about a star here, a star fall, and look how it says, and to him. So you got to put him with the star, so it's a fallen angel. Okay, was given the key of the bottomless pit. Okay, and this fallen angel, like it says in verse 2 there, and he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, and as a smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke and the pit. Notice how the language here at the beginning draws a parallel with with the horsemen here, we got fire, smoke, and brimstone. So, um, to be quite honest, I actually think, and also just, sorry, you know, we got a fallen angel here, okay, and here, you know, four angels were loose in the Euphrates River. So, the fact that we got these fallen angels dealing with these, monster demonic entities, especially when you read the language and the context. To me, this is real, folks. It's just, demonic beings, if you like, especially the 200 million wiping out one third of humanity. Okay, now, um, let me give you then the statistics as to, what can we expect in terms of numbers now. Um, Roughly right now on Earth, we have a population of 8 billion people. Okay, now it is believed that there's roughly just over 2 to 2.5 billion Christians worldwide, thereabouts. Okay, it's a rough estimate. Let's just for argument's sake, that there's 2 billion. Okay, well, at the rupture of the church, 2 billion people will disappear. So we're going to be left with 6 billion people. Okay, now, Jesus tells us then in Matthew 24, okay, that there's going to be practically World War III, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and that there's going to be pestilence and famine. Okay, now, out of those 6 billion, then let's just say for argument's sake, let's just say the 1 billion are wiped out during World War III, and due to the war, of course, and also because of famine and pestilence. Okay, let's just say that we are left now with 5 billion. Okay, now, if once we get to this Revelation chapter 9 with these 200 million horses, okay, we now got 5 billion people left after World War III. Okay, if a third are wiped out of these 5 billion, a third of 5 billion is roughly 1.6 billion. Okay, so roughly once this army of 200 million, demons, if you like, for a better word, wipe out one third of humanity or what's left after World War III, okay, there's only going to be roughly about 3.5 billion people left. And this is 3.5 billion people left, one third of the way, because we are on chapter 9, one third of the way of, Revelation. Don't forget the Revelation starts in chapter 6, okay? And it ends in, chapter 18, basically, so it's actually, one third of the way. So one third of the way, we're only going to have roughly about 3 to 3.5 billion people left. So those figures are incredible, folks. Of course, it's a rough estimates, okay? But just to finish up with this video, to be quite honest, folks, I don't think that this is symbolic at all. Like chapter 9, if you read the whole context, okay, and draw the parallels, okay, of, the fallen angel opening up the bottomless pit, and then you got these four angels that are loose in the Euphrates River, okay, they are going to be leading an army of 200 million horsemen, okay, and here you have the description of how dreadful they're gonna look like. I honestly believe that this is real language and not symbolic at all. Now, one of the tips that I want to give people when deciphering Bible prophecies is that make sure that when you read a prophecy, okay, that you stay within the limits of the prophecy. In other words, don't try to over exaggerate or under exaggerate, but stay precisely and say precisely as to how the prophecy is going to come to pass. Because God doesn't waste his words in the Bible. A Bible prophecy is going to come to pass precisely how it says that it's going to come to pass. No more and no less, okay? So just keep that in mind. And, Be very, very careful with the book of Revelation. Some of it is symbolic, other parts are real, and other parts are a bit of a hybrid between symbolic and real. And how you can tell the difference, then it's a matter of having experience in deciphering, Bible prophecies. Okay, I've done a lot of work. I have deciphered many Bible prophecies for you. I believe this is my 21st, well, first biblical deciphering. I haven't heard anyone on YouTube say that, hey, this 200 million army of horsemen actually refers to demonic entities. 100% of people on YouTube are saying, at least from what I'm hearing out there, that this refers to, a great big army from China, or perhaps a combination of China plus, North Korea, which is a rogue state, okay, and perhaps even India. Now, to finish up, I disagree. I think that the language in which I read in chapter 9, and when I read the context, and when I draw the parallels or the descriptions between the locust and the horsemen and the fallen angel, and and these other um, four angels that were loosed, and I read the descriptions of the locusts and then of these other horses. I, to be honest, come to the conclusion that it's actually real. Don't forget, folks, that after World War III, okay, it's probably going to be the period when we see this, chapter 9 coming to pass. And don't forget that if China wants to wipe out, um, you know, uh, 200 million, if you like. I mean, sorry, if China wants to wipe out, let's just say that I go along with what people say, that this 200 million army, if you like, coming out of China, they are going to wipe out 1/3 of humanity. And don't forget that China is not the only country that has nukes. We got countries like France, the United Kingdom, Germany, that has nuclear weapons, and also America, and they can get together in a coalition against China. So I can't see how China can wipe out, 1/3 of humanity, or actually roughly 1.6 billion people on their own. I'm not an army person, but I don't think that is possible. I actually think that the whole language here in chapter 9, just to finish up, it's real. Although, it can look like it's kind of like symbolic. I understand that. I get it. But I think that this whole chapter is actually real, because you actually need all these demons to, you know, you need actually the speed. They need to be quick and swift to wipe out, 1/3 of humanity, which is going to be roughly about, 1.4 billion, around there, something like that, just as a rough estimate. So only demons with the speed can actually do this. So that's my view on it. I highly urge Bible scholars to give this chapter 9 a reread and draw parallels and comparisons in the descriptions between the locusts and the horsemen. Read the language, read how we have a fallen angel for the locusts and 4 angels loose, in the Euphrates for this other 200 million army. And if you read the language and the context, I think that it speaks for itself, in that it's actually all demonic. And not for one moment do I believe that it's China, although from a psychological point of view, I can see how people will immediately draw a picture in their minds. Immediately, 200 million, okay, that's China, period. I don't care what anyone says. That's not the case, folks. Just take your time, read the language, draw parallels between the fallen angel and the other four that are going to be loose. Draw parallels on the description, okay, of the locusts and the horses and things like that. Draw parallels on the language and its style. And I think that you will come to the conclusion that I have, that this is actually real, So that's it. I believe that this is another first biblical deciphering, because what I'm hearing, at least out there on YouTube, is that 100% of people are saying that, hey, this 200 million, it's an army from China, period. And that's it. But I beg to differ. I don't think that is China at all. I just think that these are demonic entities, and that's it, and period. So thanks for watching, folks, and I'll talk to you guys later.